Grab yourself a coffee and pull up a seat because today I'm teaching you how to play Invincible the card game, brought to us by Indie Boards and Cards and Skybound Entertainment. I'm Mark Maya, and this is Board Game Coffee.
Vincent, get back here this instant!
Thank you. Oh, I love you too. I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you. Thank you.
Before we get started, you should know that the components used in this video are of the prototype variety and don't represent the final look of the game. So with that said, let's get back to the teach. Invincible the card game is a 1 to 4 player cooperative deck building game where the deck you build never gets shuffled. Never. In this video, I'll be teaching you how to set up and play a 2-player game of Invincible the card game. The setup instructions for a 1, 3, or 4-player game can be found on the Setup Turn Order page of the rulebook. Invincible the card game can be played as either a one-off standalone cooperative challenge or as a story-driven campaign known as Expeditions. For this video, we'll be focusing on the core rules of Invincible, which will apply to both modes of play. But we will not be going over the individual rule adjustments for Expeditions as to avoid spoilers. If you've come here looking for a particular section of the rules, check out the index in the description below. Now, before we get much further, I'd like you to know that the creator of Invincible the comic book, Robert Kirkman, is one of my favorite writers of all time. So, Mr. Robert Kirkman, if you're watching this, feel free to leave a comment. It would make my day. Your goal in Invincible is to work together to defeat the big bad villain before they destroy the city or wipe out your entire team. The game is broken up into rounds, and during each round, players and the villain take turns in random order determined by this turn order deck. During a player's turn, you can acquire fuel, tech, and weapon cards from the supply to build up your deck in order to defeat the villain. On the villain's turn, they'll play cards from their own deck and trigger special abilities unique to them. Alright, now that we got an idea of what Invincible the card game is all about, let's get to the setup. The bad guys are coming, which means we're going to need some heroes to save the day. The first thing players need to do is select which hero they'd like to play as, and place that hero's playmat face down in front of them. To build your hero's starting deck, each player should collect the cards listed on the back of their mat and stack them in the order shown, with the leftmost card being the top of your deck and the rightmost card being at the bottom. Then, without shuffling, place your deck face down next to your player mat. Next, collect the cards listed here to form your starting hand. Once that's done, flip your player mat face up and place the matching colored disc on each of the spaces indicated with these starbursts. Red disc on the health track, blue disc on the power track, and a yellow disc on the slot track. Now, assign a player number token to each player based on the number of players. So for our 2-player game, we'll only need these 1 and 2 tokens. The others can go back in the box. Place these tokens here on your player mat. Who gets which number doesn't really matter, and you'll see why a little later in the video. After everyone has their play area in order, select which city you'd like to defend and place it in the center of the table. Now, until you play through the campaign and unlock additional cities, you'll only have access to this one. So this is the one we're going to use. Once you got your city, place a blue disc on the starburst space of the city's power track and set its health dial to match the value printed here. The supply is where you'll buy cards to improve your deck, and it's made up of 3 different card types: tech, fuel, and weapons. Sort each of these categories by the symbols found here. The end result will leave you with 1 tech stack, 2 fuel stacks, and 3 weapon stacks. Shuffle each stack separately, place them face down, and flip over the top card of each. In addition, gather up all these debris cards and place them face up next to the other cards in the supply. These cards can't be purchased as the other cards can. The only way to get your hands on debris is if a card's ability allows you to do so. Lastly, place all the health and stun tokens in easy reach of all players. Next, we need to create the turn order deck, and how you do that will be determined by the number of players. So, for our 2-player game, we'll want to make a deck that's made up of 2-player 1 cards, 2-player 2 cards, and 2 villain cards. Shuffle these cards together and place them face down on the table. There are different deck configurations for other player counts that I won't be covering in this video, but you can find setup instructions for a 1, 3, or 4-player game in the rulebook. Now that we've got our heroes assembled, our cities selected, and our supply area in order, it's time to set up the villain. Much like the cities, you'll have to play through the campaign to unlock additional villains. So for now, the Flaxens are our only choice. Each villain has a challenge rating printed on the back of their mat. So if you're looking for an easier challenge, select a villain with a lower number. You also have the option of increasing the villain's difficulty to Expert or Nightmare by placing the appropriate token in this area here and apply its effects as you play. To face this villain at its normal difficulty level, just leave this space empty and place the challenge token back in the box. Once you have the villain character selected, place it in the center of the table face down, and set the villain's health dial to the number shown here. Next, we need to create the villain's deck. To do that, take all the cards with the villain's name on it, and locate the ones with either a number and the words all or none printed in the lower left corner. Cards with no information in the corner will be explained in the special setup rules pertaining to that villain, which we'll cover in just a few minutes. So let's set those aside for now. Since we're setting up for a 2-player game, shuffle the cards indicated for all player counts and those for 2+ player counts. If we were playing a 3-player game, we would add these 3+ cards to the deck, and these 4s if we were playing a 4-player game. The cards with the word none printed in the bottom left corner are never shuffled into a villain's starting deck regardless of the player count. Once you've separated the cards for your current player count and shuffled them together, set them face down beside the villain mat. The cards for higher player counts and those with the word none printed on them don't get shuffled into the villain's deck, but instead are placed in the villain's discard pile to be used later in the game. Now, follow the additional setup rules explained on the back of the villain's mat. Let's walk through this villain setup as an example. The instructions on this mat direct you to place the infantry cards we set aside earlier into a face-up pile to form the infantry deck. It then asks us to place 2 infantry into play. When placing infantry or other minions into play, line them up below the villain's mat like so, and place a number of health counters on those minions equal to the number shown here. The next step is to replace one of the villain's turn order cards that we placed in the turn order deck with this special Flaxen's turn order card. Once that's done, shuffle up the turn order deck again and put it back face down where you got it from. The next thing we need to do, according to these instructions, is flip over the mat and place the level 1 Flaxen's token into play. Since we're setting up for a normal level of difficulty, make sure the level token is set to normal, not expert. Lastly, collect the remaining level tokens for the villain you just set up and keep them nearby. We'll need those later. At this point, it's a good idea to familiarize yourself with the special rules associated with the villain you are about to encounter. That way, you know what you're getting yourself into. Okay, now that we're all set up, let's learn how to play Invincible the card game. Unlike most games, Invincible's order of play is determined randomly each round with the use of the turn order deck. At the start of the game and at the end of each turn, draw a card from the turn order deck to determine who takes the next turn. If a villain card is drawn, immediately resolve the villain's turn. If a player card is drawn, the player whose number matches the drawn card will take their turn. If you need to draw or reveal a card from the turn order deck and the deck is empty, shuffle the discarded turn order cards together and place them face down to form a new turn order deck. If you're playing a 1, 3, or 4-player game, the turn order deck works a little differently, so you'll want to look that up in the rulebook before you get started. Okay, so you've flipped over the top card of the turn order deck and, oh, will you look at that? Your number comes up. Now what? Well, I'm going to tell you. A player's turn is broken up into 3 phases: the attack phase, main phase, and draw phase. During the attack phase, the only thing you can do is attack with the weapons that you already have equipped. You can't do anything else. That's it. And just to be clear, the attack phase is the only time you can attack, unless you play a card that says otherwise. If you have no weapons equipped to your character when your turn starts, then you can't attack during this attack phase. But let's assume you do. When you attack with a weapon, simply declare which weapon you're attacking with and who you're attacking, villain or minion. Resolve as much of the weapon's text as possible, then place it in your discard pile right away. You can attack with as many weapons as you have equipped in any order you want, but you must resolve each one completely before moving on to the next. And if you don't want to attack, then you don't have to. Any damage dealt to the villain is instantly deducted from their health tracker. If the villain's health ever reaches 0, the heroes win. If damage was dealt to a minion, then remove that many counters. If you remove the last counter, place the minion in the villain's discard pile unless otherwise stated. In the case of these infantry minions, once they take lethal damage, they are returned to the infantry deck instead of the villain's discard pile. Now, there are some cards that allow you to attack with another player's weapon during your main phase. When that happens, apply the card's text as if you were the one holding it, but discard the card to its owner's discard pile once you're done. Okay, now that we're done attacking, let's move on to the main phase. During the main phase, you can perform any of these actions in any order you want as many times as you'd like. And you can find a full list of these actions right here on this handy-dandy reference card. Let's break those down for you, shall we? When you play a fuel or tech card from your hand, instantly resolve each card's text one at a time before moving on to the next. If you can't resolve a card completely, just do as much as you can. If a card has multiple effects separated by the word "or," choose just one to resolve and ignore the other. Fuel cards are your primary source of energy. How much energy a card provides will be listed here in the card's text, and will be indicated by this number and lightning bolt icon. Energy can be used to gain a card from the supply, charge up your power track, and increase the number of weapon slots on your character. When you play and resolve a fuel card, leave it in your play area. Do not place it in your discard pile. Not yet, anyways. All accumulated energy you generate on your turn is there for you to spend until the end of your main phase. But when you do reach the end of your main phase, any unspent energy you have remaining is lost. It doesn't carry over to the next turn. Tech cards have a wide variety of effects. And just like fuel cards, when you play a tech card, resolve its effect, but leave it in your play area. Do not place it in your discard pile. On your turn, you can spend the energy you generate to buy any number of face-up cards from the supply. Although you can't buy cards from this debris pile, but we'll come back to that in a minute. To gain a card, spend energy equal to the value shown here, and place that card face up in your discard pile. Anytime you take a card off the top of the supply deck, for whatever reason, flip the next card face up. Anytime you would gain a card from the supply with this buy keyword listed in bold, instantly resolve the effect associated with it. This effect will only trigger the moment the card is bought, and never again. Now, about this debris pile. Debris cards are a special type of weapon that can only be gained with certain card effects or abilities. Debris cards aren't considered part of the supply, and although you can't buy debris, they still have a cost of 2 energy. And even though they have different artwork, they all do the same thing: deal 2 damage. Overcharging a face-up tech card in the supply allows you to instantly gain the benefits of that card without adding it to your deck. To overcharge a tech card, pay the same cost you normally would to buy it, but instead of placing it in your discard pile, resolve its effect and place it on the bottom of the tech deck. And remember, whenever you remove a card from a supply deck, flip the top card of that deck face up. If an effect instructs you to destroy a card, the card in question is removed from the game and will no longer be used. Well, not until your next game anyway. This is your slot track. It represents how many weapons your hero can have equipped at any one time. You can increase your hero's slot track by paying 3 energy for each slot you want to move up. So if I maxed out this hero's slot track, I could equip up to 4 weapons at once. Some villain effects might result in the loss of slots. If this happens while you have your slots full of weapons, you don't have to get rid of them just yet. But if you ever start a turn with more equipped weapons than you have slots to hold them, then you must attack with your weapons until that is no longer the case. To attack a villain or its minions, you have to have at least 1 weapon equipped to your hero at the start of your turn. And since you can only equip weapons during your main phase, you'll never be able to attack with a weapon the same turn you equip it. To equip a weapon, simply play it from your hand and place it over your heroes like this. You can equip as many weapons as you have available slots. Once a weapon is equipped, it stays equipped until you attack with it. If your weapon has this equip keyword in bold, resolve the effect associated with it each time that weapon is equipped. This is your power-up track. You can spend 2 energy to power it up 1 space. Why? Well, to use your abilities, of course. Once your power track is at full power, you can activate your hero's unique ability by powering down all the way and resolving the text as written. As long as you have enough power to do so, you can trigger your hero's abilities multiple times a turn. You're also never required to activate your ability or power down unless you want to, or a card tells you you have to. The city also has its own power track and unique ability that can be used by any player when it's fully powered up. Unlike the player's power track, you can't pay energy to power up the city, but there are card effects, such as this one, that allow you to do just that. When a card instructs you to power up the city, move the disc up 1 space on its power track. When the city is fully powered up, any player during their main phase may activate the city's ability by draining its power completely and resolving the ability's text. And just like the player's unique ability, you can activate the city's ability as many times as you want as long as you have the power to do it, and you're never forced to use it. Some cards have Afterburn effects in addition to their other effects, and are indicated with this red banner. The Afterburn effect of a card can only be used when it's in your discard pile, and only once per turn. However, you can trigger more than 1 Afterburn card in a single turn. Afterburn cards are designed in such a way that makes them easy to find in your discard pile without disrupting the order of your cards. When you use an Afterburn effect, leave the card exactly where it is. Do not reorganize your discard pile in any way. Since the cards you buy go directly into your discard pile, any cards you buy with an Afterburn effect can be used the turn you buy them. Some cards have the assist keyword. The assist effect on a card can only be triggered during another player's turn, not your own. During an ally's turn, you can place a card with the assist keyword from your hand onto your player mat. If you do, resolve that card's assist effect. You can play as many cards with the assist keyword in a turn as you want. At the beginning of your next turn, return all the cards that you placed on your player mat back to your hand. And you should know that while these cards are on your player mat, they're not considered to be in your hand. Okay, so now that you're done doing all you're going to do during your main phase, we move on to the draw phase. But before we do that, there's one effect that I'd like to go over, the stun effect. Some stun effects will allow a player to stun either a minion or a villain. If a stun effect uses a word enemy, it can be used on either a minion or a villain. When you stun an enemy, place a stun token on them. Then, the next time that enemy would resolve an activate effect, skip the effect and remove the stun token. If the villain does not yet have a level token with an activate effect, the token remains until they do. Each enemy can only have one stun token on them at a time. Okay, now that we have all that cleared up, onto the draw phase. The draw phase is where you get to draw back up to 5 cards, but before that, there's a few things you need to do. First, place all the fuel and tech cards you've played this turn into your discard pile in any order you want. After that's done, you have the option of discarding any number of cards that you might still have in your hand in any order you want, or keep them all. It's completely up to you. Now remember, in this game, you never shuffle your discard pile, so the order in which you discard cards matters. Once you're done discarding, draw cards from the top of your deck until you have 5 cards in hand. If you run out of cards in your deck while drawing, simply flip your discard pile to form a new deck and continue drawing from there. And remember, no shuffling, just take your discard pile and flip it over. That's it. Now, at any time during the game, you're allowed to look through your discard pile, but not your deck. And if you do look through your discard pile, it's very important that you do not change the order of your cards. At the end of every turn, player or villain, reveal the top card of the turn order deck. If it comes up a number, the player who has that number plays next. Because turns are decided at random, it could very well happen that you or the villain get 2 turns in a row, and that's completely okay. Now, if the turn order card that comes up is a villain card, well, I guess it's their turn. The villain's turn is broken up into 2 phases, the main phase and the draw phase, where they get to play cards from their very own deck. During the villain's main phase, resolve any activate abilities listed on their villain's level token. Then, resolve all activate abilities of any minions that might be on the table. When resolving minion cards, you must resolve them in order from oldest to newest, newest being the last one you played. For this reason, I like to lay the minions out from left to right as they appear, which we'll cover shortly. This way, I always know which is the newest minion and which is the oldest. After resolving all of the villain and minion abilities, the villain reveals 1 card from the top of their villain deck. If the card is a strike card, as indicated here, resolve its effect and place it face up in the villain's discard pile. But if it's a minion card, instead put it into play and add health tokens equal to its health value shown here. In addition, if your villain has a level token, add bonus health tokens equal to the value shown here. And if the minion you just laid out on the table has an instant effect, like this one, resolve it immediately the moment it enters play. And remember, When placing minions, keep them in order so it's easy to remember which minion is the oldest played versus the newest. All villains start off as a level 1 villain, and as the game continues, they level up in difficulty. You see, if the villain deck is empty when you enter the villain's draw phase, then immediately level up that villain. When this happens, place the next level token for that villain in this space here and resolve any instant abilities. In this case, placing 2 infantry into play. Any activate abilities won't take effect until the villain's next turn, so you can just ignore those for now. Once the villain is done leveling up, shuffle the villain's discard pile, place it face down to form a new villain deck, then draw and resolve the top card of that deck as normal. Perform this level up process each time the villain starts its draw phase with an empty deck. Every new level the villain gains overwrites the one that came before it. If the villain's deck is ever empty when it enters the draw phase, and there are no more level tokens to place because it's already reached its max level, then the game is over and you lose. Each villain will have a unique rule set that is explained right here on their mat. The rule for the Flaxens, for example, states that when this Flaxen's turn order card is revealed, the city takes 1 damage for each infantry in play. So, since we have 2 infantry in play, the city would take 2 damage. Once that's resolved, the villain will continue taking their turn as normal, activating effects, and drawing from their villain deck. The Flaxen's rule also states, if you ever need to put an infantry into play, but you can't because your infantry deck is empty, your city suffers 2 damage. There's a good chance that during the villain's turn, a hero or 2 has taken some damage. Whenever a hero takes damage, reduce their health track by the amount of damage received. If a hero's health track ever reaches 0, that hero is exhausted. Whenever a hero becomes exhausted, resolve the effect described in this white area of the villain's mat. When a hero is exhausted, they still continue playing as normal, with a few exceptions. An exhausted hero cannot be healed, so once you're at 0, they stay at 0. Any damage that would be dealt to an exhausted hero is instead doubled and applied to the city instead. If a villain's card targets a hero with the lowest health, you must select a hero that is not exhausted to take the damage. And if at any point all heroes are exhausted, then the game ends immediately and you lose. When a hero or city is healed due to an ability's effect, simply increase their total health by the amount healed. Unless that hero is exhausted, in which case they can't heal at all. You should also know that neither the hero or the city can be healed beyond their starting health points, but the villain, on the other hand, can. In Invincible, there are more ways to lose than win. You see, the only way for the players to win is to reduce the villain's health to 0. But the villain wins if all heroes are exhausted, the city's health drops to 0, or if the villain is at max level and can't draw a card from their main deck. And to make matters worse for our heroes, some villains come with their own additional win conditions which will be described on their player mat. No one ever said being a hero was easy. And that's it. I hope this video helps, and I hope you enjoy playing Invincible the card game. See you next week. Thanks for joining us. If you like this video and you want to see more, subscribe to our channel. It's the best way to keep up to date with everything we do here at Board Game Coffee. But if you want to see more right now, we got plenty of videos to choose from. And if that's not enough, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm Mark Maya, and this is Board Game Coffee. And remember, have fun, keep gaming, be social. See you next week.